All right. Well, let's talk about weirdness, Dirk.
Okay.
Let's talk about weird, crazy stuff, I got the right guy here to talk about that.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about the world of genomics, right? And, it's a fascinating thing, even if you're not I'm not a scientist, but I mean, just reading this stuff is just incredible. I mean, it's mind-bending. It's strange, really, if you think about it. And it's about to get a lot stranger still. And I want to give a hat tip here to QDL fan Al Metzel, who's probably watching right now.
Hey, Al.
Hey, Al. For forwarding us the article, Biotech CEO, Genomics World to Get a Lot Weirder, which appeared earlier this week in the Laboratory Equipment website, or on the Laboratory Equipment website. The jumping off point here for the story was a keynote given by Andrew Hessel, and he's the CEO of the biotechnology company Humane Genomics at last month's International Symposium for Human Identification. His talk was titled The Golden Age of Genomics, but he quickly corrected that, and I quote, he said in his address, "We're not in the golden age of genomics," he said. "We're just getting started today. It's going to get a lot weirder." It's a direct quote.
Weirder.
A lot weirder. That's a direct,
weird now?
Direct quote from his keynote. It's going to get a lot weirder. So how weird is weird? How much weirder are we going to get than where we are right now with genomics? Well, synthetic life forms are already here. I mean, as he states, and many of you probably know this, I didn't really realize that this was going on to this degree. Yeast genomes.
Oh, okay.
Right, can now be created, or written is the term that they use in this industry, for a couple $1,000,000. You can write a yeast genome.
Well, that's
worth.
In case you need a new yeast. Well,
but you know what?
Some industries probably do.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, it's worth a lot of money. He talks about this actually as an aside. He talks about this within the framework. He's the CEO of the genomics company. He talks about this in the framework of the amount of money invested versus a return from a business perspective. So, yeah, new yeast genome is worth something. I mean, it costs a few $1,000,000 to design it, to write it. There's a payoff there. Human genomes now could feasibly be written as well, maybe for upwards of $1 billion, from what Hessel said in his thing. Biology app stores could happen. You just could download your little app right in this world. Virus hacking, very specific virus hacking, can happen here as well. He talks about it from the perspective of that you could potentially have a virus, a germ that's designed not necessarily, although it's possible, but not necessarily for a broad group of population for millions and millions of people, but you could target a gene, target a germ for one person, like one person in the White House, maybe. I mean,
right.
You could launch that into the world. That could make people really ill. I mean, there's a lot of ethical questions around this. I mean, Hessel says that we're at the cusp really of artificial life, that we could create life forms, and that human life is just a more complex, very much more complex than yeast. I mean, you could get to that point. It's really more of a matter of investing, how much you want to invest in that, what the return on that's going to be. But again, there's ethical issues. Al alluded to some ethical issues when he wrote to us to kind of call our attention to this. It's like, there's ways you could design genes to not only to improve your life or your appearance or whatever, but to give some people an immunity to certain illnesses and others not, if you can't afford it. I mean, maybe. There could be more of a schism between you can be as healthy as you can afford to be, maybe, with this type of very focused genetic information. It's a scare. It could be scary. Hessel says in this thing that it won't be scary. He's a businessman. That it's going to unlock a new golden age of humanity to be able to do this. He kind of downplays the scary part of it, but there's scary parts of this too.
Because it's his company.
Right.
Well, here's the thing that interests me about, in any story I read, I try to look at what is the quality angle in it. Mm-hmm. And there is. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, we still kind of defined quality in terms of inspection. Mm-hmm. Right? And obviously that's broadened out. And even 20 years ago, the idea was, quality is what does the customer need or what does the customer want? When you start looking at it from that perspective, then quality is in everything, including genomics, because he has a genomics company. Right? And there's plenty of genomics companies out there. They have an audience. They have a customer. what are you going to give that customer? And just because the customer wants it, should you develop it?
Yeah.
So you might be giving the customer what they want, but is it ethical to do that? So now you have the question of, well, conformance to specifications,
Right.
or what the customer requires. Well, sometimes what the customer requires may not be something that you want to invent. And even if you think you do want to invent it, I think when we start to get to some technologies, and actually we're going to be talking about technology here in just about 4 or 5 minutes, it doesn't matter what the technology is, whether it's genomics or data or the Internet of Things or whatever, there is always an ethical side to it that we as people who work in the quality field have to consider, because now when you look at everything from the perspective of delivering what a customer wants, you really have to ask whether you really want to develop a product, even if it's a perfect product that perfectly delivers something that maybe should not be out there.
Yeah. Well, it's akin to the idea of negative liberty or positive liberty, right? This idea that you can use quality, you can use developments of things to let people have whatever they want, but there needs to also be an idea that you're gonna have quality and have guardrails in place to also protect people from anything that they want, because people aren't always the best arbiters of what's in their best interest, or certainly the best interest of the future of the planet or of the species. So I mean, you have to be weighing all those things very strategically, and in any product.
Well, and I think it's also, I think it is, and genomics is the case, and Hessel alludes to this, is that everything is a tool. Every product is a tool. So even if there is a negative use for it, and obviously for genomics there can be some very negative uses for it, it is just a tool. So what safeguards do you put in place, whether it's legal safeguards or technical safeguards or whatever, to prevent or mitigate a tool being used in a way that is detrimental to society or detrimental to the customer? So I think also we got to remember, an invention itself isn't necessarily bad. It's how it's used that can be bad. And then so that's then as the developer, it's your responsibility to try to look at the risk end of that and mitigate against.
And this isn't something that's a now issue necessarily, or even a future issue. I mean, this has been going on since the advent of technology. Is the benefits and the possible risks of these various technologies, and it's a constant question you have to ask. And people will say, well, you don't want too much regulation. Well, you need some regulation. You need to regulate some things. You need to prevent people from taking it too far. What is too far? Well, everybody's going to define that a little bit differently too.
And that'll change culturally and societally.
It does too. Yeah, absolutely.